Greetings, dear ones. I'm Maitri Libelul. This is my video series, Sunday Afternoon with Maitri. And I can hear my parakeets are going to have a few things to say in the background. I hope that doesn't too disturbing. It's 10 after 6 here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And by now they're usually getting a little quieter. We shall see. My little Molly, my one-eyed Chihuahua mix darling girl, is asleep in my lap. It's been a really busy weekend. I painted for hours yesterday. I wrote a really big blog post today, mostly really big because there were lots of pictures. I spent 4 hours painting in my sketchbook last night. I don't have it here. It's over on the scanner, or I'd hold up the picture and show you. But the painting I did last night is at the top of my blog post today, and that is called, the blog post is called, Do the Thing That Terrifies You. What's the worst that can happen? And it's really what my work recently and this weekend has been all about. Years ago, in 2013, when I was 59 years old, I started drawing. And I say painting, but when I started, I was working with pastels. I was playing. I started working with pastels, then I worked with watercolors, primarily for a very long time watercolors. And 2 years ago, when I started painting Maisie's world, I started with watercolor, moved to gouache. I still use watercolor, but with my Maisie paintings, I prefer gouache. I love gouache, not acrylic gouache. Because regular gouache, you can let it can dry out, and you can just reactivate it with water, just like you would a paint box with pans of watercolors in them. They're dry cakes and a little water, and you're good to go. And that's the same with gouache, not acrylic gouache, which is part gouache and part acrylic paint. Once it dries, it's done for. So if you put much on a palette, I tend to make big, kind of messy palettes. In fact, I'll show you. This is really funny. When I started, just happened to have this basket here. When I started painting, excuse me, I got these. I think it was, you could get them, I don't know if you can see them, in boxes of 12 or 24 packages, plastic little 6-pan palettes, very cheap, washable, because it's watercolor or gouache. If you put watercolor or gouache in here, when you get it mostly used, you could soak it in hot water, clean it, and they're like new. Wouldn't be that way if you were using them for acrylics, but they're so cheap you could even do that and it wouldn't be a big loss. But as you can see, there's paint in these. And I have a whole basket full of these because when I started, that's what I started doing. I started using these little palettes, squirt a little gouache in. They would dry out between paintings, but it didn't matter. They were just as good as new. So I decided, I have purchased several large palette boxes with lids. They might hold 36 pans, and I have quite a lot of gouache. My favorite, it's good quality, it's far more affordable than anything else. I get it on Amazon. The brand is Arteza, Arteza. There's a box of 60 colors. And I mean, every color in the rainbow and bright colors and pinks and orchids and, things that most real artists get like a handful of primary colors and they mix all their own colors. I am self-taught. I don't know how to do all that. I like getting the 60 colors, and I just about used them all. And there's iridescent colors and whatever. So I've got a couple of boxes of those over time and some other gouache. And I will show you another week when they're done. I am making like these big palette boxes. Is like one whole box is white, cream, yellow, peach, light pink. It's like all in a color scheme. And there'll be another one all with blues and greens and another one all with blacks and purples. And so I can have these around me. Maisie's paintings are very detailed, very colorful, and I use a million colors. No colors don't go together in my world. But anyway, I started drawing and painting in 2013, but I started doing these, they were just heads. I think I've mentioned this before, but I had no idea what I was doing. I had wanted to be an artist all my life, and I doodled around, but I've told the whole story about having a bad experience with a nun when I was very little who told me I'd never be an artist, and so I never tried, but I always wanted to. I would always buy art supplies and doodle around, but I never did try to really draw or paint or whatever. But when I was 59, I thought, I'm almost 60 years old. As I say to my students, if not, why not? And if not now, when? The clock's a tickin', folks. Now I'll be 67 in April. And had I not started drawing and painting when I was 59, well, I still could have started at 67. Grandma Moses didn't start till she was 78 and painted until she was over 100. It's never too late. But when I started just drawing heads. And they were wild and funky with all different kinds of wild hair. And I called them my 100 Ladies. I had the 100 Ladies project, which I did for 5 years. I shared them all over social media. I made little books. The 100 Ladies would be a very funky, wonky picture, but each lady had her story. I wrote the story to go with the picture. Some were funny, some were sad, some were melancholy, some were touching. Just about everything under the rainbow, from a librarian to an agoraphobic woman like me, to a lady trucker, to, just everything in the world. And I had so much fun. And then I stopped and started, had house fire, had 3 hurricanes in 3 years. Life got kind of busy. And I kept stopping and starting. And finally I started painting Maisie 2 years ago at the beginning of 2019. And when I did that, I stopped doing my 100 Ladies because with Maisie I had finally drawn, such as it was, or she was, a whole person with a body, with arms and legs and hands and feet. Now, I'm so sorry, my nose itches. Now they were drawn the way I could, just like the ladies were funky, so was and is Maisie. But I had kind of felt that the ladies were stepping stones to Maisie. And now that I had started doing Maisie, she was getting attention, people loved her, she's now in the process of becoming a book. My patrons at Patreon are supporting me to help me be able to do this work, which I thank my patrons at Patreon, really, who are, for a disabled senior citizen living on Social Security, this help is so deeply appreciated. So thank you to all my patrons. And a little side note, if you're interested in finding out more about Patreon, how you can support me, it helps me do these videos and do my art and do Maisie's book, which has a very important message for the world. You can look into that. All of my links are below the description after this video. All of my social media links, Maisie's Society 6 store, where you can buy all of her merchandise on mugs and t-shirts and prints and whatever. But I will have the link to the blog post I did today, because this blog post, Do the Thing That Terrifies You, What's the Worst That Can Happen, is all about how last night I decided I wanted to paint a different way. I mean, I'm still going to be painting Maisie. I'm not going to stop doing that. But Maisie's drawings are very particular. I draw them with pencil first. They are very, very detailed, bigger, and I then do what I call blacklining. As I said in my post today, I'm sure there's a real word for that, but I'm self-taught. That's what I call it. I don't care what the real word is. And that's really just doing the detail work, which really makes the colors pop. And that's all really good. But my ladies weren't that constrained. My ladies were just free floating. Toward the end, I did start doing the black lining around some of the ladies. But I started remembering the days when it all just felt free. I didn't draw at first. I just picked up my paintbrush and painted. And I want to do some paintings that I can sell along the way, because I need the income badly. And Maisie's paintings are bigger and they take a lot of time to do. They take a lot of time to draw all the detail work, and they're happening slowly, and they're going to be part of a book. So I'm going to be selling some of the original Maisie paintings, but the ones that I'm doing now that'll be part of a book, those won't be for sale because they're going to be part of a book. And so I thought, just like I've said the last few weeks, I am already bringing all of my work back in. All of the work I've ever done. Textile art, fiber art, piecework, slow stitching, all manner of creativity. I used to make handmade dolls. I did the 100 Ladies, which I saw as the precursor to Maisie. But really, I realized today, only today, I painted this thing last night, and it wasn't, the 100 Ladies, I promise you, were not even in my conscious mind anyway. But I drew this page of a bunch of ladies. And what I did in this blog post today, which I really encourage you to check out, even if you just want to scan through and see the pictures, because there's a lot of pictures there. What I did was show the finished piece at the top of the blog post. And then I talk about the 100 Ladies and how they came to be, and how I didn't realize that's what I was painting last night, but what I really did was paint the 100 Ladies again. They have resurfaced, returned, come back. and they are going to be part of Maisie's world, and I'm very excited about it. They're going to be her imaginary friends. And the painting that I did last night with all these crazy ladies is my imaginary friends are not imaginary. And so it was so much fun. And I realize as artists, self-taught like I am or otherwise, you can get into kind of a rut, or rather paint yourself into a corner when you find a style or a way that you do something and people like it and it's starting to be successful, and then you feel as though that's the thing you need to do. I mean, creating Maisie's art and her book are the main work I'm doing right now. But that doesn't mean I can't do all of the other things that I've always done that bring me joy. And I was painting last night. There was no black lining at all, no drawing in pencil first, just painting. And after the paint dried, I used some watercolor pencils to add some detail and definition. I didn't wet them. With the watercolor pencil, you can draw with it or color something in. Then when you use a paintbrush and water, the colors bloom. I love watercolor pencils. So I just used those on top of the paint when it dried for a little extra detail and definition. And in this post, I showed pictures, which I took pictures all along the way, of creating this painting. I mean, from the very first, all I did was a whole bunch of round, well, you can't even tell what they are. They're the bases for the faces, but they're just flesh-colored round circles. And then a progression all the way through the different stages of creating this painting. You can see it all in this blog post. I'm also going to include a link to the previous blog post I did just about 3 days ago that is deeply meaningful to me about the spiritual aspect of my work, of my Patreon community, of Maisie's message in the world. It was a deeply meaningful post to me, and I would love it if you could read it. So I will have links to both of those posts with all of my links below. But the whole purpose of this post is that we get so terrified, we long to do things, and we get terrified. For me, it's at almost 67, it's like I felt like I should just stay the course, paint Maisie, do the book, stay in this very narrowly focused area of work. And I've done that for 2 years, and I have loved doing it, and I will continue to do it. However, my heart started to ache. I felt such a sense of longing to do some of these other creative things, to bring back all of the creative things I've done in my life. And I somehow realized it's like nothing is going to be lost here if I do it all. If I make fiber art and textile art and paint the 100 ladies and paint Maisie and do all of the things that I do. I'm also a huge gardener. I have a big cottage garden all the way around the front of my house. If I do all of these things, it's as though they're going into a funnel, and what comes out, the creative stream that comes out of doing all of these things, will deepen and enrich my work with Maisie. And so the thing I was terrified by was that, do I have the luxury of doing that? Of slowing down, in other words, the process of painting Maisie and working on her book. I'll still be doing it, of course, but slowing down with that a little to allow space to do all of these other creative things I've always done and loved. At almost 67, I'm not willing to give it all up. They have all made me who I am. And my world is the basis for Maisie's world. She is my alter ego. I like to think of her as the better part of me. My higher self, my muse, my guardian angel. She's all those things. And I get to have fun with her. I get to live vicariously through her because Maisie can do things that I can't. Maisie also does things that I do. So it is fantasy and fiction and memoir all rolled into one. And the more I am more fully me, doing all of the things that I love, the more Maisie's work in the art and the book I'm working on will have a fullness and a depth and a greater dimension than I think it might have had. My idea was that if I tried to keep out all of my other creative pursuits, what I would end up in Maisie's world would be a two-dimensional world. When I allow it all in, it's a three-dimensional world. And I'm sharing all of this with you today because I want you to think about it too. What is the thing you long to do, but you're terrified? You think you won't succeed. You think people will make fun of you. You think you can't live up to your own expectations, and certainly not those of others, and on and on and on. Well, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, the sands of the hourglass are slipping away fast, and that is our life. I'm not willing to let my life go by without doing everything that I possibly can, scared or not, and believe me, I've been plenty scared. But I've done it anyway. And had I not, I would have missed so much. There's that quote, you must do the thing you think you cannot do. And it's a famous quote, and I'm sure you've all heard it, and it's by someone famous, and I know who it's by, and it just slipped out of my mind in this moment who to credit that quote to. But you must do the thing you think you cannot do. The reason that I created the blog post today in the way that I did, with several pictures showing every step along the way, is to show how an inexperienced, self-taught, 59-year-old woman taught herself to paint. I didn't think of the big picture. I didn't think of anything complicated. I drew a circle. I kind of stared at it. I made two eyes. They were big, wonky kind of eyes. A blip of a nose, because I had no idea how to draw a nose, and I still don't. And the mouths, well, those were some pretty big lips. But there it was. Eyes, nose, mouth. I drew a person. I mean, that's what I thought. The first time I did it, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I drew a person. And I may only have been able to make heads. For 5 years I made heads. But I got ever more creative with the faces, with the crazy hairstyles. I started having a lot of fun with the backgrounds, colorful in details, step by step by step. If you have longed to be an artist, well, I believe we are all artists anyway. I believe we're born artists. It's just that the world and the expectations of teachers and other people in the world think that you have to be able to draw a certain way, it has to look a certain way, you have to follow these rules, and the people who do all that are artists. Me, I'm self-taught. I love, love, love outsider art. I love the work of anybody who just has the chutzpah to put something down on paper and say, look, I did that. I did that. I can do that. And if you keep doing that, over time, you develop a style. And it's your style. And you own that. And you don't let well-meaning, trained artists to tell you that you're doing it wrong, or how you could do it better, or that maybe if you did it a different way, you might ... Stop them. No, thank you. Because when you start listening to that, you'll freeze up. You'll get scared. You'll think you're not doing it right, and you'll stop. And don't do that. I have had students in the past, and I shared this with my patrons in Patreon. And I think I've mentioned this in one of these videos before. People often use the excuse of not being able to afford art supplies. Well, my first art supplies came from the dollar store, and it's a good place to start. And then I bought art supplies on Amazon. You can get decent art supplies that are not expensive on Amazon. You don't go to an art supply place and buy expensive I mean, if you can afford it, great. But you don't have to spend a lot of money. When I went through my phase of mixed media where I was painting with acrylics, one of the things, and I was inspired by the wild, wacky outsider artist Sue Kreitzman, that's Kreitzman. Look her up, she's a trip. She talked about when she started painting, she used fingernail polish. And I was painting with acrylics, and I went in the dollar store one day. They had this big display of a wild array of bright colored and fluorescent and iridescent nail polishes for $1 a piece. I bought black and white and a handful of colors, incorporated it into my mixed media acrylic work. I had a ball. I tell my students, go get one of those bags at the dollar store that's the cheap white paper plates. There might be 100 plates in the bag. And you want the cheap ones. You don't want anything that's slick or coated. And use that instead of fancy art paper. Fill a plate a day. Make a vase. Make abstract art. Paint with anything. Paint with finger paints. Tempera. Grandma Moses, at 78 years old, who ended up becoming one of the preeminent, Molly's moving the thing, folk artists in America, and raised 10 children and started very late in life. All she had to paint on were scraps of wood and house paint. That's what she started with. So don't use an excuse about art materials are expensive or hard to find. But do the thing, whatever it is, and it doesn't need to be art related. Do the thing you're terrified of. What's the worst that can happen? I bet you can do it. And I bet it brings you joy. See you next week.